What's up, y'all? It's your girl Cornelia back with another episode of Black News, a podcast where we break down current events, hot topics, and local stories involving Black people. Now let's get into it. I brought up last week how there is, and before I even get to, hold up. Reminder again, I'm going to be out next week. Okay, I'm going to be out next week. I'm not going to be able to upload a new podcast episode. So I'm so sorry. I ain't got no evergreen app stored. Okay, I ain't got nothing in the can. I'm very busy. And right now, there are too many topics happening in real time I just feel like if I post an evergreen episode where stuff is literally hitting the fan, I feel like some of y'all gonna be side-eyeing me like, girl, why are you talking about this when this is happening? Girl, what's really going on? So I'm just gonna take off. Okay, I'm gonna be gone. Hey, hey. Okay. So with that said, let me get into these topics. I think last week, and I say I think because I don't remember, child, be so much going on. I believe last week I talked about what was going on in current events as it relates to women, and there's just been some weirdo behavior online, but I want to spend more time on this week's episode talking about that because I'm going to keep it a buck with y'all. I'm extremely alarmed. I am so alarmed with the changing tide in behaviors, emotions, attitude towards women. I'm just I'm I'm not really scared about many things, but y'all, I'm kind of scared. So let me be more specific. And I'm going to take this time to talk about not these necessarily these situations, but what I'm seeing as a result of these situations. Most notably, we have been thrown into dead smack in the middle of the trial against Sean Combs, and Cassandra Ventura has spent almost a full week on the stand. We also have seen that Halle Bailey has filed a petition to get full custody and has been granted a restraining order against her baby daddy, DDG. We also have gotten some hearsay from one of Tory Lanez's bodyguards or kill somebody bodyguard saying that he thinks and he knows that Kelsey was the actual person who shot Megan Thee Stallion. And then lastly, and I'm only saying lastly as it relates to what I'm talking about, not lastly as these are the happenings. There has been continued and increased racist attacks towards Angel Reese. All of these involving women of color, Black women and women of color, because while I thought Cassie was mixed this whole time. It turns out she's not mixed with Black. Let me clarify. But the majority of these women are Black women. So I will say Black women and women of color. That's who all of these conversations, attacks, narratives have been surrounding this entire week and beyond. But this week really made me realize it's worse than we thought. So let let me paint a picture. We all know the internet is a cesspool. And honestly, I think the disconnect and the problem we having is these phones. Because before we had access to these phones and 24/7 news cycle and we got to be and hear everybody's thoughts, we did not have all of this information, whether it's factual or incorrect, being dumped onto us at the same time. We also, and I'm going to say this because people been saying this and I totally agree with this. We as a society, when you think about schooling and education, we were always separated into buckets. You had the gifted and talented, you had just the general ed, and then you had the people who were skewing on the other end. Okay, I'm not gonna call them names, but but even in school, we were separated out, whether that should have been the case or not. But with that in mind, even when you get to college, because even in order to get accepted into college, that puts you in the same circles and environments with like-minded individuals. Yes, people still had individuality and people had different trains of thoughts and backgrounds and cultures and things they were bringing to the table, but you had to have the GPA to get up in that bitch, okay? You had to fill out the application, you had to have the grades. So before that, we only had access to conversations with like minded individuals or people who at least were similar to us as far as skill set and levels and amounts of knowledge. Now we are literally interacting with everybody. And with social media and having unlimited access to information, you can just Google something and take it as truth, even if it's a bootleg website and somebody just threw it up. You have people believing information that they themselves do not know how to verify and to check if it's correct. You have people online literally arguing with doctors and attorneys who have never stepped foot into law school or medical school. It's the phones. But also with that, there is an influx of toxic content, red pill content, content that is specifically geared towards bashing, disrespecting women, being pumped out into the world and is validating feelings within people that should not. I would question how they got those feelings in the first place, but that information should not be mass produced in that way. But there is no way to control it. There is no way to monitor it. And it just is what it is. And in situations like this, where we have lawsuits and cases and conversations around Black women, we often find ourselves at the brunt of impact. We are the targets. So I have seen some of the nastiest, most disrespectful takes and opinions that I have ever seen in my life. And I am an older woman now, and I know how to navigate my own world and interactions with men. But I thank God that I am not a young woman at this moment in time. And I feel really bad and scared for young women now, because you could literally find yourself in a situation where you getting to know somebody and he could be being fed this like red pill, disrespectful, nasty content, and he essentially throws that out onto you. I can't imagine if I were young now, because who I was at my young age, I would not have had the tools to be able to navigate that successfully. And I am so sorry these young women are dealing with this. And young men, if you are also dating men. I'm also seeing how people are lacking the ability to put people's lives into perspective. They can't compare them, like they can't put themselves in somebody else's shoes, right? To the point where it seemed like people starting to act like abuse is fine. I just can't imagine not being able to empathize with someone being abused, mistreated. I'm having such a hard time understanding that, because I often try to put myself in someone's shoes. How would I feel if I were in this situation? Have I ever been in a situation where I felt like I was trapped or wanted to leave, and somebody had control over me or they threatened me? What is it like when I can't even, I'm too scared to even leave my job? Or and people were giving great examples online about how everyone has been in situations where they weren't able to speak up for themselves. So it's hard to understand how people don't understand what a woman being abused and used as a sex slave was going through. You can't even speak up when the nail technician do your nails ugly or she make the acrylic too fat. You sat there with that raggedy full set and walked out of that salon. And when you got in the car, you cried, you called your homegirl, complained about it, went home and told your boyfriend or your husband you hated your nails, but you didn't say nothing to the nail tech. You've been at your day job this whole time and your boss been talking shit, bullying you, disrespecting you, being condescending. You too scared to even go to HR. But you would have ran out if somebody held you hostage, kept your money, took your car, your ID, and had you as a sex slave. And let me put this side note in here. If you ever dated a man with some real money, I do not want to hear about what somebody woulda, shoulda, coulda did if you ain't never dated no man with no real money and no real power and control. Because it's one thing to compare and be like, well, I wouldn't have done that. Yeah, because your boyfriend makes 75,000. If you ain't never interacted with a man who was out here making some real money, you don't know what it's like. That is a level of control and manipulation that a lot of people just don't understand. And listen, I ain't gonna get no too much info, but trust me, that is a whole other world of manipulation. It it is not like Jamal and them who work down at the and in tech and he making 155K. Yes, that's a lot of money, but it ain't like being with somebody who's controlling you and he's worth $1 billion. I don't want to hear it. Okay. You got a bum haircut. You can't even tell your barber you ain't like the fade. And you still gave him a tip. But you think you would have walked out if somebody held you kicked your head in while you was fleeing to the elevator bank trying to get out? Y'all give me a break. Give me a break, knock it off. So I would just hope, and I know the Black News listeners ain't subjected to this, but I hope that we just learn how to have more empathy for people, because everybody talk about what they would have done. You wouldn't have done shit. You would not have done nothing. Also, real quick, let me say another reminder about court cases. And I really wish people just Google it, man. Like, we, the individual, and I talk again, I said, I forget which episode it was months ago, could have been last year. But again, you, the individual, do not decide who is taken to court for a criminal trial. If somebody is outside and they physically assault you, put you in the hospital, and you feel like they should go to jail for assault and battery, you do not determine when the court date is and what the charges are. You do not determine when we be seeing, I've been watching Law and Order SVU for 27 seasons. Y'all been seeing Mariska Hargitay and them down in Elliot Stabler down to the New York Special Victims Unit for years. You know this information. The victim does not decide what the charges are and when and who goes to court to trial. So why all of a sudden does all of this knowledge that people have, and again, I'm not saying TV knowledge is good enough to be able to act like you an attorney at law, okay? Y'all be thinking y'all Maxine Shaw. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying certain things we should know by now. So this idea that Megan, Cassie, and whoever is the one taking people to criminal court is absolutely ridiculous. The people versus the state versus the government versus. Some people are complaining about why they testifying. If you got money, you receive this and why does it? What is this, a shakedown? If the people, if the government, if the state wants you to testify and subpoena you, guess what you got to do? Testify. You telling me that you at home, Darnell, would have gotten a federal subpoena and you would say, no, I'm not coming, you would have been up in that courtroom sitting in that witness stand, hand on the Bible, right hand up, right hand high for you, okay? Or you go to jail. Do you think these people should go to jail because so they won't testify? Give me a break. You give me a subpoena, I'm on the stand. I'm not going to prison for nobody. Get out of here. What time's the court? Okay, what time? 9. I will be there. 8:45. I'll be badged in. You can get me through the metal detectors about 8:30. I'm on time. I had a little breakfast. I bring a muffin up in that bitch. I'm gonna be on time because I'm not going to jail. Get out of here. I'm also really concerned. And y'all know, here I go. Here I go. Okay. I'm so concerned with the lack of critical thinking and comprehension skills that I have been seeing. I know every time I get on here, I talk about how somebody can't read. Child, when I be having to read the articles on here, I'll be stuttering Stanley. But y'all know what I mean. My library book card packed. And I'm not using that to brag. I'm just saying, I, as an older woman, especially someone going through perimenopause, I understand what is happening with brain fog and older age. I get it. I do not want to be one of them old women who be losing it because I didn't do my due diligence. So I at least try to read, listen to podcasts, audiobooks. I'm trying to do all that. Got me some little scrap, some little crossword puzzles, some mental stimulation games. So when I say people can't read or lack of critical thinking skills and comprehension, I understand that I'm not perfect myself. But what I have seen, I want not even this past week, just over the last maybe year or two, it seems like it's getting worse and it's happening faster. Like, even it's so magnified how many people seem to just not be able to comprehend and use critical thinking skills. I also pay a lot of attention to people's conversations online about educators and education and what children are learning, and how people are trying to use chat gpt, and students are now opposed and getting upset when they have to read books or do adequate research. I fear where we are with technology. There is no way to stop this. And I honestly think millennials are the last generation to who were able to have a full chance at a regular education. The younger millennials were on that cusp of the technology generation, but they at least had that back end of not being allowed to use AI and to use like Google to do all of their work, and to streamline and to spearhead all of their learning. But y'all, it's bad. It's it's and it's just, you never like, I never thought, I would have never thought that we would be in a place where you can see someone post something or say something, and their response, you can tell that they just did not comprehend and understand what you were saying. You can tell they weren't able to put two and two together. You can tell is no critical thinking. When people say, and people be sarcastic and they joke around when you're frustrated with teaching like your kid or your little nephew or niece something, math problems, and they be screaming, if Johnny had 5 apples. I literally feel like we are living in if Johnny had 5 apples scenario in real time on a constant basis. It's the phones. I'm seeing more hatred, even particular with Angel Reese. What Angel Reese goes through within the WNBA, just because the storyline of the NCAA and now the start of her career has been surrounded by Caitlin Clark. Angel Reese just be out here living her best life, doing podcasts, hooping, working with Lisa Leslie in the summertime. She had a McDonald's meal. The girlies like her. She got young fans. I mean, just a great young woman trying to make a name for herself in her sport and in entertainment. Child, she at the Met Gala, not getting caught up in no boy drama. Just a great young woman who now be having people screaming like animal noises at her for whatever reasons they try to justify. Again, it just seems like more and more hatred. And that it's just so frustrating. And I'm so disappointed that people are experiencing this on this scale. And I don't know what it is. I can ask Chat GPT. Okay, let me hold on. Let me ask Chat GPT. Cause I got to get to the bottom of this. And I'm not saying Chat GPT no, but y'all listen, Chat GPT they don't it. And I know it's training AI, but hold on. So asked I just asked Chat GPT, why are more and more people lacking empathy these days? And it says the perception that more people are lacking empathy today is a common concern, and it stems from a mix of societal, psychological, and technological. See, I be struggling too. Technological shifts. Here are several reasons why this might be happening. One, digital disconnection, social media and online communication, echo chambers, and it explains both of those. Two, information overload and compassion fatigue. Constant exposure to global crises, tragedies, and social issues can overwhelm people emotionally. To protect themselves, many become numb or detached. When every day brings a new crisis, it's hard to care deeply about all of them. Cultural shifts towards individualism, economic and social pressures, polarization and dehumanization, parenting and socialization trends, mental health struggles. Hey, I'm just saying, okay? I'm just saying. I also want to implore people, and again, I know this don't apply to us, but if you a new listener, before you speak up as an expert on something, and I put an asterisk around this because on Black News, I know some people could perceive me doing this weekly podcast as me acting like an expert. No, I am using my life experiences, my experience within the entertainment industry, my 15 years of experience in the entertainment industry within the areas of stand-up comedy, hosting, acting, writing, whether that has been on television, performing across the country, podcasting, news, you name it, I've done it. Not to flex, but I'm dropping my credentials in here so people can realize and recognize I've been in the field, and I'm using me being I'm using what I've observed being online and a part of conversations to bring to light and highlight conversations that involve Black people and to offer my perspective. But I know I'm not an expert in the areas of things like law or sports. I don't get online or in conversations with people in community settings arguing and debating things I don't know about. I will say I don't really know, but this is what I think. Or if I feel like I know something and an actual expert comes in and chimes in, I am willing to defer to that expert because I did not go to law school. I did not play basketball up into the pros. I did not go to medical school. I would like people to be more self-aware in those areas because the number of people that I've seen online arguing with actual lawyers about criminal cases and and saying things and blurting stuff out when it's obvious they don't know a damn thing is shocking. I have seen people literally explain what a RICO is. People who've been to law school, who are practicing attorneys right now, who explain what RICO is, how it applies in certain situations and current cases and all of that. And for someone who don't do a damn thing to chime in and say, no, it ain't. That's not true. That's wrong. You know how delusional you got to be to not have any education in an area, to literally not know what you're talking about And to tell someone who is an expert in the field that they're wrong and don't know what they're talking about, you know how crazy that is? That's crazy. You know how crazy you got to be arguing with an expert, to be told you don't know what you're talking about, to just shrug your shoulders and continue on to the next argument with someone else saying the same things that just got you told that you a dumbass. That's crazy. I've seen more people online, and this is what's really crazy to me. And I'm gonna wrap this up because I want to talk about that plantation burning down. What's really crazy to me is you can be online and get called stupid in like 100 different responses. And people just keep going like nothing ever happened. That would really hurt my feelings. That's why I think it's a lack of empathy, sympathy, concern, social, emotional intelligence, all of these things, because people literally do not care. They be like, you call me stupid? Oh, well. And they just keep on keeping on. Resilience is what it is. But overall, I am really concerned as a woman to bring it back home, because all of this that I just talked about and all of these things that I've witnessed, and the increase of this, it has mostly been directed towards Black women. And I don't like that at all. I do not like it. And I will not stand silent. I don't know how I'm gonna help the cause, but baby, it's getting real in the field. So let me know y'all thoughts, and if it's something that you noticed as well. If you got some solutions or just a different take, I'm open to hearing all of it. Child, hit me up. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me at Canelia on social media. Something really interesting happened in Louisiana this past weekend. And by interesting, I'm specifically talking about Nottoway Plantation being burnt to the ground. And I say interesting because there were a lot of conversations from people, and naturally, Black people were like, good, whatever. Bye bye. Ancestors are finally free. Child, those people online saying that they were people who could read fire and pointing out in the fire billows like shadows of spirits. I'm talking about like stuff, I'm fascinated by stuff like this. So I was all locked in. But there are also people who seem to be expressing sadness over the plantation being burned down. So for context, Nottoway Plantation is now being used, or was being used, as a resort where people would have weddings. People would stay in renovated slave quarters, and I'm not being dramatic. They would stay in them, rent them out, be just kicking it on the property of the plantation, as if plantations aren't actual torture camps. So first, before I read the history, because I want to read the history and talk a little bit about that. History is written by the victor. We know that. The nuance and the difference within American history is that the air quote victors of the Civil War allowed the losers to dictate, write history, create a different narrative, and to continue on with the same bad behavior that should have been punished and that they should have been held accountable for after the Civil War. If you, for generations, were allowed to enslave, torture, murder, mutilate, brutalized, rape, experiment on, traffic, and on and on and on. If you've been able to do those types of things, somebody should have been, there should have been some consequences of however. But if you've been allowed to do that, and then all of a sudden things are over and nothing happens, you just get to keep living your life. We get to a point where in 2025, you still got people living on torture camps, because I don't care what anyone says. You would not get married or be sleeping in a cabin on any concentration camps overseas. None of that would be happening. It only happens here with plantations. People think just because there's some pretty flowers and some in an oak tree lined walkway that all of a sudden it was a beautiful place with legacy. No, they were being tortured. It was a torture camp. The sooner we come to that realization, the better off we'll be. We won't as a whole, but I would like us, when people start talking about plantations and things, I would like to change the wording, because plantation to some people sounds like a pretty place. We should change the language to say a death camp or a torture camp. Let's just be clear with it. But let me read this history. And this is via Wikipedia. First, I'm going to start there. Nottoway Plantation, also known as Nottoway Resort, was a historic plantation house located near White Castle, Louisiana. The home was a Greek revival style mansion built for John Hampton Randolph in 1859. Now, at 1859, let's keep that in mind, because enslavement only lasted a few years after that. However, we do know that immediately after the Emancipation Proclamation, one, people picked up their slaves and then moved to Texas to continue slavery for the next couple of years, because we know Juneteenth, we know the history of Juneteenth, but also sharecropping came about, which was the same thing as enslavement. The only difference is you did not legally own the black people, but they were still being abused. They were still being beaten and tortured and held hostage financially onto that land. They also wasn't paid no money, but okay, we'll get into that maybe another time. Continuing on. John Hampden Randolph was born in Virginia in 1813. He was a member of the prominent Randolph family. He migrated with his family to Mississippi when his father, Peter Randolph, was appointed a federal judge in Woodville, Mississippi by President James Monroe. John Randolph married Emily Jane Lydell in 1837 and had 11 children. He devoted most of his time to his cotton plantation, but believing growing sugarcane and producing sugar would be more lucrative, he decided to move his family to southern Louisiana in 1842, where he purchased a 1,650 acres a cotton plantation that he named Forest Home. Converting the plantation to the new crops 2 years later, and constructing the first steam-powered sugarcane mill, he was able to triple his earnings over his cotton production. Y'all know who was constructing these mills? Like, think of who was doing all this work. He acquired 176 enslaved persons, making him one of the more prominent slave owners in southern United States. This was the largest plantation in Louisiana. 176 enslaved persons. This man was a millionaire. I'm not going to continue on and on and on, but this plantation caught fire. I don't know how. I don't know who started it. I know all of a sudden we started seeing posts on social media of black people out front laughing and pouring out liquor, taking pictures and videos, and being happy that this place, this torture camp that has been used as a resort, was finally being burnt to the ground. And there were a lot of people who were expressing some form of sadness, right? This is history. It's historic. And they burn to the ground. We should maintain history. On the website of the plantation, the title is Nottoway Resort, largest antebellum mansion. Where the history at? That ain't we preserving history. It is advertised as the old Southern heritage, weddings at Nottoway, explore Nottoway, book your stay today. It does not have anything about the enslaved people. It does not have any information about what took place there. I just clicked on About Nottoway, and it says Nottoway is one of the South's largest historic mansions located on the famous River Road between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, Louisiana. The mansion's massive white columns and grand balconies stand guard over the Mississippi River, while on the north side, the spectacular three-story rotunda overlooks sweeping oak-draped lawns. Baby, where did enslaved people at? Property map: 40 overnight rooms, including 5 suites, the mansion bar, the mansion restaurant, over 15,000 square feet of event space, bridal dressing room, outdoor pool and cabana, tennis courts, lounge and fitness center. Baby, where are the enslaved? History. Okay. This is the first thing on the history page. The Nottoway's grounds feature 16 majestic oak trees spread across the 31-acre property. The oldest tree on the property is estimated to be 162 years old, the same age as the mansion itself. It goes on to list the names of the trees, which were not named after some of the enslaved, but named after Randolph's children. Then, if you keep scrolling down, book your stay today. There is nothing on this site about this being a plantation. So when people talk about preserving history, baby, they not preserving the history. Where the history at? I'm trying to see it. And I also would like to add, because one thing that's also romanticized with plantation culture, there's always that oak tree lined pathway. And this is again where critical thinking skills come into play. Come on now, let's talk to them. In most cases, those trees were planted by the enslaved. If the trees are the same age as the mansion itself, who do you think planted the trees? And do you honestly think that the trees were like little babies when they were planted? I've read some accounts in some cases where large adult trees were enslaved, were tasked with removing them from one area and replanting them on walkways. Do you know how difficult, exhausting, back-breaking work it is to replant an adult tree? And even if that's not the case, right? Let's say there were young child trees, if you will. You know how stressful it probably was and how much struggle and pain and strife was put upon these Black people for making sure that those trees grew and remained beautiful and line that strip of walkway in the correct way. Like, let's come on. So when people are like, it burned down, legacy, the history of the South, child, come on, knock it off. I also just couldn't imagine sleeping at night in a building or a house that was occupied by people who were being tortured to death. I just can't imagine. Why would I do that? Why would I want people to look inward? If you look inside, ask yourself, am I comfortable being in this environment where people were literally tortured to death? How is that okay? Is it the cognitive dissonance? Is it crack? Like, what could it be? Is it crack? It got to be. The other unfortunate thing is they're going to rebuild this. I know they are. Insurance going to kick in. They're going to rebuild it, and it's going to be classic Annabelle Mansion. And it doesn't have to be this way. People always give examples of the Whitney Plantation where they make it a point to be very clear about what happened on that property and what that land means. For more context, the Whitney Plantation is also in Louisiana. And even before you click on the website, it's a nonprofit museum dedicated to the history of the Whitney Plantation, which operated from 1752 to 1975, produced indigo, sugar, and rice. And then when you click on it, it says, first, this is the main page. The Whitney Institute educates the public about the history and legacies of slavery in the United States. They have pictures of exhibits, the monuments and statues that they've built dedicated to the Black people. They even have, like a little message about how they do not allow weddings at this venue. It's not very hard. Like, it's not hard to get it right. It's not. And you got to be a evil, you know what, to not care that people lost their lives on that land, and for you to just keep on keeping on. I just don't, y'all. You got to be a better way. So there's a better way to do it. And as someone who has visited plantations, I'm not one of those people who can't go. I feel like I owe it to our ancestors to see where they were and to understand what they went through. I ain't one of those people, I don't want to hear about it. I can't hear about it. I'm going to hear about it. Tell me what happened so I can pay my respects, so I can do my part into helping it not happen again, and so I can acknowledge the human experience and what people went through, and just show love any way that I can. So again, haven't been to plantations. It is a very solemn experience, but I would go again. I would keep going because again, I feel like that's our duty and that's our responsibility. But I wouldn't have no damn wedding. And if I got invited, I'm not going. I can't go. What do y'all think about it? People also being funny and saying, and y'all know I don't follow like stuff like this, but they were saying the Annabelle doll got taken to Louisiana. As soon as she got taken, the thing burnt down. I don't understand. I don't know if Annabelle is on a tour of burning stuff, but that's what they were saying. People also were saying these are the ones who burnt down the plantation, and they showed a picture for them Tales from the Hood dolls. Remember that? Y'all remember Tales from the Hood, and them dolls was terrorizing them people, and they was the ones doing the harming. I wanted to say they was one doing the business because it just flowed the tongue, but that ain't what I'm talking about. But they was saying that it's the Tales from the Hood dolls, child, which low key, it probably was a version of that. So whatever, hit me up though. Let me know your thoughts about this. Yeah, you can find me at Canelia on social media. On this week's episode of Black News, we talked about the recent attacks on social media towards Black women, what this means, and the root of what's happening. We also talked about Nottoway Plantation in Louisiana being burnt to the ground. Hit me up. Let me know your thoughts about all of these topics, some or none, and I'll check back with you guys next time. That's it for this week's episode of Black News, y'all. Thanks again for supporting the podcast by sharing, liking, subscribing, and rating 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. To find more information about me, you can check me out at Canelia on social media, as well as on my website, which is canelia.com. And as always, thanks for supporting, and I'll be back next week with new topics and a new episode.